What you know what, just to be safe thing you did end up saving your ass later. I lock my doors habitually. Walk through a door. Reach behind me. Twist the lock. It's the way I was raised. And I honestly don't even think about it. I've actually gotten myself into trouble absent-mindedly locking other people's doors, house, offices, shops. I'm a menace. This one night, I'm sitting and reading pretty late. And I suddenly think, I need to check my front door to make sure it's locked. Lo and behold, it's actually unlocked. Shocked me a bit. But I locked the door and the deadbolt and slid the chain for good measure. Then go get myself a glass of water. As I'm walking with my glass of water from the kitchen back past my front door, I catch a movement out of the corner of my eye. I turn to the door and watch the doorknob slowly try to turn left and right. The micro movements that a locked doorknob can be forced when twisted. I put on as deep of a voice as I can and forcefully stage project. I have a gun. And I'm calling the cops. The doorknob stopped turning. I slept in a closet that night. Just in case. Edit. Thank you for the updates and especially the person who gave me the gold. I tried to message you privately. But I couldn't. So, thank you. Locking your car doors as soon as you get into the car. Wore my helmet on a bike ride. Slipped on the ice on a turn. And before I realized what had happened, felt the bonk of said helmet resonating against the concrete. I'd always imagined that, in the moment of the unthinkable, that I'd have that moment's notice to tuck my head in to avoid impact. But instead I have this tale to tell. Wear your helmet, my friends. You won't know you need it until that very moment you do. Couple months ago, slept in a really awkward position and woke up with a really bad back pain. It was my day off, so decided to just relax and take it easy for the day. Fast forward 10 p.m. Pain was still there and couldn't sleep. So drove me to the ER just to be sure. Turned out I had pneumonia and bilateral pulmonary embolism. Never had any problem before, just some mucus in the morning. But I always had it due to my terrible airways. But I ended up hospitalized for 12 days and started coughing up blood clots. I am now on blood thinners for the next 6 months. Haven't my so convinced me to go to the ER. She was scared cause her mum died in a similar way. I could have severe and permanent damage to my lungs by now. Or be 6 feet under. Was delivering pizza in a sketchy block of town late at night. Huge apartment complex with multiple buildings. Walking up to the front door I noticed a couple guys wearing dark clothing about 100 feet behind me walking in my direction. Delivery was on the 2nd floor and by the time I reached her door I heard the main door of the apartment complex open and close. She used a CC for the order and tipped in cash, so when I was putting the receipt into my bag, where I kept my cash, I actually pulled the rest of the cash out and stuffed it into my inner jacket pocket just to be safe, leaving just the change I had that night in the bag. Started to head down the stairs back out to my car and 2 guys jumped out from behind the stairs and the one had a gun pointed at me and told me to give them the money. I quickly handed them my bag filled with quarters and they took off towards the back entrance of the apartment complex. I never ran so fast in my life back to my car. I wanted to make sure I was as far away as possible before they realized they robbed me of $3.50 in quarters. Took a manual copy of the folder that the script was supposed to back up and then update. Turns out the script was broken and didn't copy the folder. But just as a file, left of the trailing. At the end. Manual copy meant we could replace it and try again with the fixed script instead of finding the original somewhere else. As a teenager, a friend of mine managed to lift a set of keys to a new car on a dealership lot. We were all super excited to go there that night, and take that new car for a spin. At the last moment I thought of how disappointed my mom would be, and backed out. That night, during the joyride, they got into a high-speed chase with a couple of cop cars, took an intersection at 85 miles per hour against traffic, and were spun into a brick wall after an initial collision with a garbage truck. The driver was killed, 17, and my 2 other friends suffered critical injuries and were hospitalized for weeks. No doubt in my mind that I would have been injured, or killed, as well. Getting health insurance for my baby before she was born. She ended up in hospital week 3 of her life and the cost were about $40,000. Writing down what was agreed verbally right after an instruction as per our conversation. You have instructed me too. Please confirm I understood correctly so we are all on the same page. Wearing a helmet while skating or bicycling. It's always worth it. Every single time. 2010. Be me. A teenager. Homesick from school. My father worked from home that day. We lived in Europe at the time, and his family lived in the US. He used to call his mother, my grandmother, on a daily basis. 6-hour time difference. So he'd call her when it was afternoon for us, and mid-morning for her. I had a weird feeling in my stomach, and asked my dad to call grandma. He swatted his hand and said he had a meeting starting in like 10 minutes. I pushed/insisted. Again. Some sort of just weird feeling in my stomach nagging me to have us call her. My dad had her Skype configured such that it would always pick up the call, even if she wasn't home. We call. Ring ring ring. Skype call picks up. We see into her guest room. We can't see her, but we do see her arm just randomly waving back and forth in the air. She lived in an assisted living facility at the time, so we called the front desk in her specific wing, then called EMS, etc. Turns out she'd had a stroke. As a nurse plus EMS responded, my dad just swiveled in his seat, looked at me, and asked, "How did you know?" Like I said, just a weird feeling in my stomach that I just couldn't pinpoint or put my finger on. But just a nagging, dreadful feeling in my stomach. When I was 10, I was outside jumping on my trampoline when I heard gunshots, not unusual in the country. But they sounded closer than they should be. I heard them again and they were getting closer. I was too scared to run back inside because they might think I was an animal. I didn't know what to do, but I felt I needed to move back further on the trampoline. So I did. The next gunshot hit me in the neck. It was bird shot and only one pellet, which is still in there 24 years later because it lodged in tissue right by my carotid. No doctor will touch it. The doctor at the hospital said moving back on the trampoline saved my life. I used to like to parkour off random street objects. Benches, ledges, posts. Once, I saw a short cement wall, about 2 feet tall, that looked like it'd be fun to jump off of. So I run up and plant my foot down on it, ready to long jump off the sucker. But something in the back of my head said, "Don't." So I stopped all my momentum and looked down, only to see a 50-foot drop down into 4 lanes of speeding traffic. Putting only one of my work shoes in the hotel safe along with my valuables literally has stopped me in my tracks from forgetting my wallet and passport in a different country. $5 breakage insurance on a rental surfboard. Broke that fucker clean in half in my first 10 minutes. Had bad feelings about a pregnancy the entire time. Doctors dismissed me through the entire pregnancy. Approaching my due date with a plan to deliver at a birth center. My midwife sent me for just to be safe, ultrasound. She didn't want me so anxious in labor. She wanted to set my mind at ease. That ultrasound revealed severe malformations in my baby's brain that would have trapped her in her suffering body for up to a few years. Because laws are absolutely nonsensical when beginning of life and end of life care collide. We could not have put her into palliative care. She would not have survived more than a few days without medical interventions. But they kept telling me it was not a fatal diagnosis. Then going on to list a dozen horrible ways it would absolutely kill her. So she would have gotten trapped in a cycle of painful interventions for her painful problems that would slow down her death but never make her better. I understand why parents choose to extend their baby's life as long as possible even when it is hard. And I honor that path. But I value peace very, very much, and my own instincts were clear for my own baby. I ended up traveling 2,000 miles to have an abortion in my 36th week of pregnancy. Which was very, very sad and hard but humane and merciful compared to my babies and my alternatives. I hate that that happened. I resent that I was ignored and dismissed along the way. But I am deeply grateful that I still had any choice at all in how my baby died. Previously, I have volunteered at my local fire station. One day while I was visiting the day crew, we got a call for an animal bite. I didn't have official fire crew clothes on. So I figured I'd jump into my bunker pants to at least show that I was with the department. We get there, and find a woman with a mauled leg, and a pissed off dog on a lead. I'm the last to get out of the truck, and as the others are going to check the lady out, I'm walking to them, when the dog comes up to me. He stares at me for a second, and it's about the same time that he's moving forward that I realized I've just stepped inside his lead range. He grabbed my leg and tried to bite me, but the pants held up, didn't even break the skin. When I was working in a little town called Ye in South Sudan, we had checked an area suspected to be a cluster munition strike. I confirmed it was one, so I submitted a clearance plan. The next day, we got to the checkpoint that was about 2 kilometers from our confirmed strike area, and something in my gut was telling me not to go. I said to the team, "We are not going to work there today," and instead we went into town, told the relevant authorities and bosses the plan was changed, and conducted non-technical surveys in the town to ascertain other possible areas of ERW, explosive remnants of war, contamination. We got a call a few hours later from the commissioner of the town telling us that an INGO, International Non-Government Organization, had been abducted by anti-government forces in the area from our control point where we were going to clear from. They were held hostage for 11 days before being released unharmed. That would have been us. Edit. Spelling. Snow chains at the bottom of the mountain. A bunch of cars passed me on a clear road on the way up with several warnings all the way up. I saw a local throwing on chains with no snow in the area. I decided to be safe and put them on. 30 minutes later I was in one of the worst snow driving conditions I've ever seen. Whiteout conditions in a snowstorm that eventually resulted in the complete shutdown of the roads. I passed car crash after car crash with just enough traction to feel somewhat comfortable moving 15 miles an hour. Anyone heading to Tahoe needs chains and chains that fit. Don't fuck around. I don't care if you have a 4-wheel drive. Driving through Tahoe and Mammoth during snowstorms is no joke. Literally sunny with no clouds to blinding white darkness in an hour. Edit. One more thing. If you find yourself near Heavenly and Siri sends you to a snowed over hill that feels too steep, turn around. Unless you have the right setup, you aren't gonna make it. Snow chains or not, you will slide. Just take the Harrah's gondola if it's that bad. If you don't already have your own gear, try another resort. Heavenly is uniquely bad for rentals and beginners in general. My neurosurgeon referred me to an imaging clinic last week for new MRIs. When I went in for imaging, I asked the front desk guy, "Hey, just to be safe, will you make sure TRICARE authorized the referral for my imaging so I don't get slapped with a bill?" Turns out it hadn't, and I saved myself a few $1,000s. Worked alone in a gambling/video poker place. Closing. Strange guy came in and started making small talk with me. I was expected to be kind and friendly to everybody who came in, so I was doing that. I decided to send a message to my boyfriend and a friend, and then something in me told me to take a picture of the guy as he moved closer to the counter I was behind. I snuck one real quick and sent it to said friend since she was awake. She called me immediately as she drove the 20 minutes to my job. An hour before I got off. I'll add, I didn't drive, so I had no vehicle in the now abandoned parking lot. The only car being his, which was conveniently backed in, right next to front door. 2 days later there was a missing persons report released of someone who was a very familiar build and features that I have and suspected trafficking in the area. She went missing later that same night. He left after my friend showed up. I've never had such an uneasy feeling in my life, and I truly think sending those messages are what saved my life. He was waiting for me to get off work at 1 a.m. Our hours were right on the front door. Was driving with 3 friends down to the dance clubs. We hadn't pre-gamed at all. Cruising with windows down. Music blasting. See a car ahead. Wasn't driving weird, but something said slow down. I slowed. Had 5 or 6 car lengths between us. Even my buddies felt it. One said, "That is a sweet ride." And another said, "Too bad it'll get wrecked." Not 2 seconds later the car swerved across 3 lanes of traffic. Bounced off 2 other cars. Flipped and rolled a couple times. The second car hit was driven into a guardrail. The metal ones on wooden posts, which speared the car. No survivors. If I had not slowed down, that likely would have been the 4 of us. I took a screenshot of my Google Maps location when I got stuck in the snow one night when my assistant manager had offered her spare bedroom because of a nasty snowstorm that prevented me from getting back down the mountain. Manager was able to communicate my location to AM's sister thanks to that screenshot. I went 1 street too far and ended up in the yard of some person who wasn't even home. Okay, so wife and I drove up a mountain. This is a state park situation, so it's paved on the way up. All one-way traffic separated by a large divider in the middle. But no guardrails. The road isn't super narrow, but it's also not wide. Rain and fog is turning into sleet, freezing rain as we gain elevation, and the sun is getting lower. This is at least a 30-minute adventure to the top. And I can see from the car's thermostat that temps are dropping fast. I'm in the passenger seat playing it cool, no pun intended, but conditions are getting worse. We get to the visitor parking at the top and take a quick pee. Can't see anything up there. Visibility is almost zero and it's windy. Ah well. The calm before the storm. I start thinking, yeah, maybe I should drive down just in case. We switch seats. Well, let me tell you something. It did indeed get slippery on the way down, and sure as shit we probably would have died if she was behind the wheel. No offense if you're reading this. But I learned how to drive in a cold climate. And you did not. At one point the front of the car was headed towards a cliff as we're fishtailing. And I'm pretty much operating on autopilot. This felt like an eternity but lasted less than 20 seconds. We escaped what could have been a very nasty situation with barely a paint scratch. Fun fact, I actually heard what can only be described as the Dune voice in my head during this catastrophe. Divine intervention. Fight or flight response. Whatever you want to call it. I heard it. Imagine the clearest message possible spoken to you in the most robotic, otherworldly monotone voice you can imagine. This wasn't a microphone. And it wasn't me. It felt more like someone or something found the audio line and on my brain. Do not panic. Steer into the turn. Ran downstairs before bed to check that I locked my back door. It was unlocked, so I locked it. I live in a relatively quiet neighborhood. Not much happens. I wake up to my dad saying, "The downstairs door's rattling." I've never woken up so quick. It's about 3 a.m. Pitch black summer night. I call the cops as my dad starts down the stairs to look. I can see my dad. He can see the door. He describes it to me. There's a man smiling and motioning for him to come to the door. He keeps trying the knob. For about 10 seconds we're freaked out, but my dad quickly realizes this guy's hammered. I put the dispatcher on speaker. I describe what's happening and she says, "Oh my god, that's so creepy." Which I feel like is probably against protocol. They send multiple units. I guess a person trying to get into your house is pretty high priority where I live. She stays on the line until the police arrive. They go grab the guy. They tell us he thought he was at his own house. We meet them at that back door and they point to some beer cans scattered around the door. We're assuming these are his? No. Those are ours. We're not the classiest.